The reason why we pay such great attention in esoteric healing to diseases which stem from the emotional and the mental bodies of man is that they are shown to have a preponderant influence in man's spiritual growth and in the resolving of his karma, and behind the outer actual physical manifestations of disease that we see in the world. Of course, today we know this as psychosomatic medicine, the medicine dealing with diseases of psychosomatic origin, and we mean specifically disorders of the mental and astral body. But we don't just dispose of the subject like that. We have gone to great lengths to demonstrate that man was an emotional being long before he began to have experiences in his physical body, that he was even a mental being in the same respect. And we know very well that disease tends to work its way outwards, from disorders within, outwardly. Indeed, the whole basis of esoteric healing is on this factor, that it's quite pointless trying to reach physical structures if the cause of the disease lies at deep levels. Much better to try and reach the disease at those deep levels. We do not see man as being a separate being in the astral world. We see him symbolically as a fish swimming in the sea of the astral world. And we see emotional forces of the astral world impinging upon its fishes or human astral bodies and affecting them greatly. We may not observe mass effects in this physical world. We may not be able to see how mob violence spreads like a wildfire. But if we could see the emotional background to mob violence, the astral background to mob violence, we would know that the astral factor is a very real one indeed. And it is our contention that many major disorders come from the collective nature of the astral world. However, that collective nature of the astral world impinges upon man's nature in certain specific regions. We say that man's astral body is a receiving ground for all sorts of emotional forces. One of these is world glamour. One of these is the collective unconscious of the Atlantean race. Such things as fear of the dark, phobias which affect the whole of mankind universally. We have to train ourselves to be not fearful of the dark. We are fearful of gravity. A baby will clutch wildly if it feels insecure and is likely to fall. Has not been taught the existence of gravity, but just knows deep within itself that to be insecure and likely to fall can cause it damage, destroy it. And so these factors lie in the astral world, these fears, these glamours, these Atlantean race qualities, and they tend to impinge on that part of the astral body which we call the solar plexus chakra, which means that the astral body, picking up its normal flows of energy, is likely to have some difficulty in radiating its emotional energy, in expressing it artistically, or in other ways, if there is an added inflow of energy, emotional energy, stemming from collective regions of the astral world. The fact that we are susceptible to massive intake of additional emotional energy has various origins. If from childhood we have not been nurtured and reared in an emotionally loving family, it will mean that the astral body has great difficulty in putting itself together, because the growing child needs emotional donative energy from its mother, or father, and other elements in the family. And if the supply of emotional energy is not available from those who nurture the child, the fabric of the astral body is weakened. And just about all the construction in the astral body will be centered around force centers, leaving great areas of the astral body unintegrated. If we're brought up in a family where there is great friction, conflicts, where there is separation of the parents, where the father is absent, the child may reflect all this, all these tensions and conflicts, in the structure of its astral body. The necessary balance of the father's negative astral body is needed to balance the contribution of the mother's positive astral body. And if the two are not adequate, then there will be, in the case of an absent father, perhaps at the war or in the merchant navy abroad, there will be a lack of emotional balance, especially in terms of the negative features. Better, rather, say, negating features, inhibiting features. And there will be over positive expression. And then there is the karma of the individual. And always we bring in a degree of emotional karma, which must be resolved in that life. If the emotional karma is considerable, then all sorts of conflicts emotionally are heightened. They are emphasized if there is a backlog of emotional karma. If the person has walked out on his emotional responsibilities in previous lives, then that karma must be faced. And so in the esoteric world, where disciplines are important, we encourage people to strengthen their emotional nature in giving it balance and integration, so that if there is emotional karma, the astral body is ready for it, to take it on. Madame Blavatsky pointed out, at the moment that we tread the path, everything that is difficult in us, everything that is good in us, openly, will be thrown to the surface, where it needs to be dealt with. It's quite useless going on cultivating a tree in a beautiful garden if the roots of the tree have struck rock. An emotional nature that has got a rocky basis, a solid basis of emotional karma that has not been tended to or expressed, lying deep in the unconscious and trying to surface, well, that tree is doomed. Sometimes we miss the boat altogether. Sometimes we have to make assessments as esoteric healers. If it is possible to work off emotional karma, that's all well and good. But if a person is reaching the age of 40 or 50, it's a bit hard to expect them still to work off their emotional karma when their astral bodies have taken concrete form. So it's very good to face up to emotional challenges in the early part of your life. The emotional challenge begins with puberty, and the physical body is growing rapidly. The emotional nature is trying to integrate, grow even more rapidly, more quickly in every respect. And the truth is that for many people, the emotional puberty doesn't end. The emotional puberty goes on all their lives. This may be because there is so much emotional karma to be dealt with, or it may just mean that the person never emotionally integrates at all. We often see emotional diseases expressed in the world, where in anorexia nervosa a girl will just sit down and starve herself to death. But we don't understand that what ramifications there are in the astral world going on in that particular circumstance of anorexia nervosa, And even in the matter of discipleship, we don't have to express emotional diseases physically for them even to show as a recognized disorder without their being present. And tremendous upheavals occur for some people in their astral bodies. And these people soil, defile, besmirch the whole environment in which they find themselves or in which they are found. And whilst that is acceptable in certain conditions, where there is, for instance, a very large family in a rowdy environment, where everybody's shouting and screaming at the same time all day long, well, the person can excrete his emotions freely, and the rest of the family accept them and radiate them out, and that's fine. But when you have elevated settings in which specific missions are being sought after or expressed, then an emotionally fouling individual can be a disaster. And the terrible thing is that the emotionally involved in these circumstances are the last to realize what they're doing. And even when they do realize what they're doing, they are often the very last who are able to take themselves in hand and stop it. And so, whilst emotional diseases in the world are extremely prevalent, they are an absolute disaster in a monastery, in an ashram, in places where group work is God alone difficult enough to maintain. And really and truly in the esoteric groups of the future, array analysis for every person wanting to serve in a group should be done right at the beginning. And where there are first-rate astral bodies, the group leader would have to think very, very carefully about admitting such an individual into group work. He may be able to use the person as an independent agent or cooperator, collaborator, but to admit them into the group needs serious thought and consideration, because certain emotional types can be absolutely destructive. It is for this reason that of the group activities, the healing group must never have disruptive influences in it. I can quite sympathize with a science group that refuses to allow new members to ask a single question for the first 3 years, no matter how well qualified they are as scientists. We ourselves have seen the result of the disruptive emotional nature of a woman student, the emotional disorder, wanting to come into the group and ask questions which lead nowhere, and constantly pouring out an emotional treacle that is highly disruptive Am I my brother's keeper? Yes. No arguments about that. But whether people should be admitted to delicate groups whose framework is being fashioned as it goes along, that's a different matter altogether. So, the emotionally handicapped in the esoteric world are those who can't be trusted to work in groups. You can fall for their natural charm, and you can say, he's a good kid. But sooner or later, the person will either consume so much of the group's energies in keeping the peace, or that person will cause disruption. The first ray astral body, of course, may be a highly creative person. Remember, the first ray is the ray of the creator, the ray of the maintainer, and the ray of the destroyer. There are very few first ray individuals who can channel those features to order, can use the first ray to create with specifically, can use the first ray to maintain something against all odds, can use the first ray to destroy something, set out to destroy something. Generally, they lack control and will destroy when they mean to be well-wishers. What we're really saying here is that there are many factors at play in emotional disorders which, no matter how accurate medical analysis may be, cannot reveal the astral factors at play. Old souls are notoriously unchangeable, indigenous, stuck in a rut. They surround themselves, let's go through the list, with glamour. They believe that age of the soul correlates exactly to the spiritual status of the individual. The older they are as souls with more lives than anybody on earth means that they are spiritual because of that. It isn't true at all. They sense the magic in things, the spookiness of things, the interplay of occult forces, but haven't the discipline to manage them. It can be dangerous as old souls, desperately conniving, and so on. Bailey tried to group diseases in terms of chakras. And she talked about the three major groups of diseases, planetary diseases she called them. And she linked these three major groups of disorders to the sacral center, to the solar plexus chakra, and to the throat center. And indeed, there's no doubt there's a degree of validity about it. But not enough detail was given for it to be corroborated esoterically, never mind exoterically. She called the emotional group of diseases, the diseases related to the astral chakra, the solar plexus center, which are basically Atlantean in origin. She grouped these under the heading of cancer. Certainly we would agree that if emotional disease has an origin, it would be in man's history when he was beginning to take energy from the astral plane and to express it in the world, artistically, in his drives for security, his desire for new experience, his desire for recognition, and his desire for response. And he had all these opportunities to express his emotional nature in this way. The emotional nature is challenged all the time. Love something, attach yourself to it, refuse to have it taken away from you, emotional challenge straight away. What if the one that you love doesn't want to maintain the relationship any longer? What if the one you love decides she loves somebody else more? Jealousy arises. Jealousy had to be dealt with. It was the response to forcibly being detached from things that you want or love or aim for. One of the prerequisites of spiritual unfoldment is to learn detachment. Now, there's no way out of it. You may put it off till tomorrow. You can mask it. You can do what you damn well like, but in the end, you must learn detachment. And the sooner you face up to it, the better. Usually most people don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about detachment. But letters come back every week from people all over the world. Now I begin to understand what you meant by being detached. And I can truthfully say that I no longer have any attachment for material things or for money or for so on. You don't really understand it until the thing that you are attached to most is taken from you. Just as you can't know what happiness is until you have been really unhappy. And many diseases result from the inability of the person emotionally to deal with things taken away from him, detached from him. Sometimes just for short periods. Sometimes the most inconsequential things, apparently. And sometimes the most absorbing things. All these are taken away. They're going to be taken away sooner or later. But they're taken away usually at a time when the person can't deal with it. And so there arises such disorders as anxiety neurosis, where something is taken away from an individual. Many a woman will go through a period of anxiety neurosis after the death of the spouse, or vice versa. The man usually camouflages it and deals with it better. The man will usually fall back on his hobbies and substitute for that which has been taken from him. Because he has hobbies, because he has business interests, because he has a wide range of options, he merely employs the options more when that option which he loved most of all is taken from him. Others can't substitute when they have what they love most taken away from them, and they go through a period of illness. They have a great vacuum in the region of the solar plexus chakra. The taking in of emotional energy from the one that they have loved and been attached to is suddenly severed. At least appears to be severed. They knew about the teachings of ancient wisdom. They could know that it isn't really severed as much as they believe. Unfortunately, they don't know who they are or what they are, or that the spouse still exists in the emotional world or astral world. So, anxiety neurosis rarely has an astral factor behind it. And you can be pretty sure, if you examine the case history of the individual, that something's been taken away. Now, we will deal with anxiety neurosis at some other time. But my way, the way I teach dealing with it, is to find a substitute. Young man in America has suffered anxiety neurosis for 2 or 3 years that I can think of. And he has adjusted to his anxiety neurosis. He entered into a disastrous marriage. The result of it was that a way of life and many other things were taken from him. He is technically well equipped, and now literally earns money only to purchase substitutes for what has been taken from him. And so, for the average person, that is the way to deal with it. For the esoteric person, you should warn them in advance that they're going to have things taken from them. That the esoteric teachings are quite clear on this matter. You may look around you and review your life very clearly and say, well, what can be taken from me? Or I haven't got any attachments anyway. But when you really tread the path, those attachments emerge very starkly and clearly. And the esoteric path will make you free yourself from attachments. And if you want to cooperate with your soul, then you can help tear those attachments out by the roots. Oscar Wilde said, you always kill the thing you love, the thing you shouldn't hurt at all. But at what level was he judging? And in the esoteric, you are faced with these matters. Going up the cliff face, there are bushes, snares, jungle, undergrowth, and the path is not clear at all. There will be things that will hold you back. Another great advantage of learning detachment is that it opens the heart chakra. It opens the heart chakra. when you are stopped in your tracks by something being taken away from you, and the challenge is for you to suffer when that happens to you. You may revert. Some men, when they lose their wives through divorce or through death, marry almost immediately. It's an example of where the attachment is too bitter, too harsh, can't be faced. Must have that blank void filled immediately. Others, under other circumstances, struggle on. And it is then that the heart center is greatly, greatly aroused, learning to do without. Learning to do without. And filling the vacuum with heart qualities. Bailey related cancer to Atlantis and suggested that the basis of cancer was frustration, emotional frustration, that it was deep-rooted. Really, we're talking about the inability of people to express themselves emotionally. Again, we think of the esoteric. We think of grades of detachment. Celibacy, abstinence, continence, chastity. Which of these can we really manage, and at what stage in our lives? And are they necessary? Important matters, which we will deal with. The frustration comes from the inability to express the person's self emotionally. Meaning that too much energy is coming in and not enough is going out. And so there form in the astral body whirlpools, which are the pathological counterpart of chakras. Whereas the chakra is a radiant sun, giving selflessly of its energy to all the surrounding organs, the focal point of astral energy, which has been subverted into irritation and frustration, is like a black hole in comparison. Sucking into itself the vital energies that would normally go in a healthy way towards the surrounding organs. Taking these energies and creating a region of such intense power as to act on the etheric matrix and thence on the genes and chromosomes, with resulting aberrations to form the supernumerary, to form extra tissue, extra cells, or cells that are unchecked, that are excessively exuberant, the result of that irritation and frustration. It's not as simple as that. There are outside factors, external factors. If such a condition exists inwardly and the person smokes, there will be weak parts in the body whose resistance to the nicotine or whatever it is lowered, and the irritation, the frustration will burst through that region of the etheric matrix. There are still even other factors. There is the karma of the individual in this respect, in respect of cancer. How long has the frustration existed? How many lives? To what extent is the karma of the frustration present? And will it exhaust itself in this life, in which case the cancer could be cured? Or will it inevitably go on for 3 or 4 lives to come, in which case the cancer can't be cured? Even if you cut it out, it'll come out somewhere else. And when we talk about the cancer group of diseases, we mean diseases of emotional imbalance, lack of coordination, lack of direction, lack of expression. Usually going back many lives, but there is an additional factor in this respect. And those who are of Atlantean stock, which means that the physical bodies that they have got have been handed down to them from certain, perhaps even rare Atlantean tribes, records of which have long since been lost, those individuals also are susceptible to the solar plexus group of diseases which we call cancerian or cancer. But you should not think that because we are referring to an emotional disorder like anorexia nervosa or anxiety neurosis, that we are referring to something that can lead to cancer. Just a loose expression, perhaps an unfortunate expression used by Bailey to describe that group of diseases linked to emotional disorders, solar plexus upsets. Just as she referred to the throat center, throat chakra upsets, as the tuberculous group of diseases, when in fact some of them have no relation to tuberculosis at all, but all have a relationship to excessive materialistic tendencies. That's the throat chakra group of diseases. Solar plexus group of diseases, emotional frustration. The throat center group of diseases, an inclination towards material aggrandizement, materialistic aspirations. We may as well here, just for the record, include reference to the sacral center group of diseases. And these disorders have an even more unfortunate name, which is the syphilitic group of diseases. And of course, you must always remember that when you are diagnosing as an esoteric healer, you don't tell some poor old lady that she has syphilis because she has produced one of the Lemurian asthmatic diseases. Sometimes you have to tell them that they have syphilis, and that's difficult enough. But when they haven't, you should avoid the use of the word syphilitic group of diseases. We'll end up in court. Nevertheless, they're very real. They're related to the sacral center, and they are ultimately, way back in time, related to sexual excesses. The arousal of the sacral center to meet the demands of heterosexuality. The demands on the sacral center of the hermaphrodite were minimal. They were increased as the sexes moved towards separation into two distinct male and female streams. And then when the two streams were established, the demands made on the sacral center were not so intense in terms of modern language or modern understanding of sexual activity. But at that time, the sacral center had not got the support of other chakras. There was sexual activity without emotional involvement, sexual activity without mental involvement, almost an inconceivable thing today, which would almost certainly produce impotency in a male anyway. But in Lemurian days, involvement in reproduction and simulations of the reproductive act were without support of the solar plexus center and the throat center. Whereas today, the activity of the sacral center is supported with energy shunts from the throat and from the solar plexus. And if there is excess, then those two centers are depleted, with corresponding disorders in the region, like tendencies to sore throats. If the throat center is shunting its energy back to the sacral, or is not receiving from the sacral area its fair share of transmutation, mutated energies. But we will deal with that some other time. And so this is the background to the subject. It's the background to the subject. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in the average medical practitioner's philosophy. And the use of drugs almost indiscriminately is not in any way going to affect the world of causes where 90% of disease originates. And you see, man is changing. Man is changing. In two main ways. He is changing because his civilization is poised today in such a way as it makes advances dictated by man. Now, until very recently, most of the advances in mankind's spiritual evolution have been dictated from within. They have been radiations from divine man, coordinated nicely with the devas who build the new forms for man. But recently, with such vast changes in man's physical world, there has emerged a strong alternative in the field of medicine alone. there have been enormous changes in nutrition. Man's natural longevity should bring him to an age of 150 years is being restored by medical prowess, by new nutritive methods. People are having longer holidays, are being exposed to the sun, are able to move into sunlight regions whereas they couldn't before, are able to vary their diet and eat fruits and vegetables that they weren't eligible for before, are able to concentrate not on the hunted victim of the kill, but now on books, on television, on all sorts of things which attract his attention. And the pace of unfoldment has oscillated out of the exclusive control of divine man, passing his radiations outwards into the stream of evolution in ways that we've described already. And it's passed into the surging physical unfoldment of man on the planet. And in a way, this oscillation towards physical unfoldment is dictating new laws, not only to the lower kingdoms of nature, new laws which weren't part of the emanation from divine man on the inner planes, but new laws stemming from the pacemaker, which is man in the material world unfolding at a rapid rate. And the devas are being forced to conform to this new pattern. And as it is the devas who fashion the body, devas of the green hue that fashion the muscular tissue, devas of the violet hue that fashion the nervous tissue, as it is the devas who are fashioning our bodies, they themselves are now under new direction in a great measure. People being forced to run miles at increasing speeds and jump greater distances. And it's good. It's good. We have to face up to it. So there are going to be immense changes. Not only at the subjective level, where devas must adapt themselves to a different set of instructions than which originally were radiated from divine man in the inner worlds, but we're going to get new medical disorders. Many of the old disorders are naturally disappearing. Smallpox has disappeared, thanks to medical intervention, thanks to United Nations working collectively as a group all over the world. Good. But that does not mean to say that disease at all levels is going to be just expunged. Not at all. We say that there will be, especially, new emotional disorders, or emphasis upon them, and there will be newer mental disorders. One of the emotional disorders which has emerged, of course, has been this matter of anorexia nervosa, where, triggered off by dietary requirements, the person goes into a state of emotional shock, where a young girl has an astral body that is not adequately integrated, has suggestions made to her that putting on weight is ugly and overeating in any form is disgraceful. The ability to discriminate has been sadly reduced because the emotional body is not properly integrated. There's dependence on the mother, for instance. The mother herself may be emotionally not giving, emotionally ungenerous. And under these circumstances, considering some of the other matters that we have talked about, the girl adopts an attitude, and it is an attitudinous matter, which immediately means you would look at what part of her horoscope? The first house, yes. The emotional attitudes are in some way severely afflicted. And because of this, the emotional attitude becomes centered on one of avoiding excessive eating, avoiding eating, and eventually refusing to eat. And it's very shocking to those of you who begin to enter the esoteric field to find that there are such disorders, and that perfectly straightforward, loving people can take the food that is given to them and give you every assurance under the sun that they will eat the food, and then scrape it out of the window when your back's turned, and literally shrink in weight from 7 stone down to 5, 4, eventually die of starvation. That there is some link between this and the present craze of starving oneself to death under protest, or with the phenomenon of Mahatma Gandhi and other things, yes, I think there is a link. I think that this is in the collective nature of the astral world that we talked about earlier. What needs to be done is to obtain some horoscopes of May's prisoners who died of starvation. We have Mohandas Gandhi, who spent a lot of his life fasting, and some charts from anorexia nervosa types, and have a look at them. Go into it further. But these conditions that I have mentioned here today form part of the astral or emotional diseases, or diseases of emotional origin. Just 2 or 3 of them. There are many others which have at least astral overtones, like schizophrenia, where large numbers of the population inherit through their genes the predisposition to schizophrenia, but only some, depending on the stress of the environment and the emotional background of the individual in being able to deal with stress, play a part in producing the schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, we mean that the individual is absolutely wide open to emotional stimuli which have no tangible representation in the physical world, but nevertheless are very real.